All right, let's bring in our NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. JJ, can't go back and change that, but how could it change Hackett's decision-making moving forward?
Yeah, Chris, I think a lot of people sort of didn't hear Nathaniel Hackett. And I was watching that live, then I went back and I watched it again. Then I texted a bunch of people out in Denver. I'm not convinced that Nathaniel Hackett is admitting that he made a mistake. I'm actually more convinced that he's sitting here saying, yeah, knowing that we would miss the 64-yarder today, of course I wouldn't have done what I did on Monday night. But then he goes and defends his process that, yeah, Javonte Williams got more yards than we were expecting. And so once we got to the mark, well, that was our plan. That was the plan we put in place. We didn't just guess and decide to do that. That was the process that we had decided about. And when you go back, like I did earlier today, and watch the television broadcast, and Nathaniel Hackett talked about this yesterday, where Russell Wilson was going to try to draw the opponent offside a little bit, try to pick up 5 free yards and an automatic first down. Then he turns and calls that timeout with 1 second remaining on the play clock. But Russ immediately takes his helmet off and goes to the sideline. He knew that they were going to kick the field goal. That was the plan. That was not, I know there was some confusion about whether the offense was going to be on the field or not, and then the kicking unit came out there. Kicking unit was coming out there as soon as Russell Wilson called the timeout. And so this was known by the Denver Broncos. Do I think that Nathaniel Hackett, if faced with the same situation, would attempt a 64-yarder to win with Brandon McManus tomorrow? No, I don't. And so maybe it's a bit lesson learned. But I think that Nathaniel Hackett very much was defending his process and not calling his process a mistake. Maybe next time he'll just believe Brandon McManus on a bit shorter field goal than a 64-yarder.
Okay, so maybe hindsight isn't 20/20 for him. It's 0 for 20, or at least 0 for 1, because that's what they are this season. The Broncos 0-1. Let's move on to another 0-1 team, the New York Jets. It's Joe Flacco again this week against the Browns. What's the latest on Zach Wilson as he tries to get back and make his season debut?
So according to Jets reporters who are out there with their eyeballs on it, he's out there today for the first time since he had that knee surgery and procedure in a uniform. One report said that he's doing some light throwing. It's a great sign. It's a small step. It's a small sign here in week 2 when he certainly is not going to be available until early October, according to Robert Saleh, the head coach there, more than a week ago. But it's a very nice sign that he's out there with his team. Of course, it's going to be Joe Flacco in week 2. They were not turning to Mike White. Joe Flacco and the rest of the Jets, at least on the offensive side of the football, had a tough go of it against the Baltimore Ravens. The Jets still firmly believe that Joe Flacco presents them the best opportunity to win a football game, certainly over Mike White right now. And so, listen, Robert Saleh, who had his unfortunately, regular defense of his team, of his locker room earlier today, with Jets reporters who said, listen, we know that we are better, but until we go out there and prove it, the shots are going to keep coming. And we welcome those shots, he says, even though he is certainly keeping a bag of receipts, perhaps a sack of receipts. I don't know how large this sort of container of receipts has to be, but that's what Robert Saleh is doing there with the New York Jets. It's going to be a tough one against the Cleveland Browns and what their pass rush presents. Obviously, the Cleveland Browns dominated the Carolina Panthers offensive line this past week in Charlotte, and now the Jets get the Browns and Myles Garrett, and they're banged up. You're not going to have Dwayne Brown at left tackle, so you're going to have George Fant. You're going to have a rookie at right tackle, and so you're going to have Myles Garrett, and you're going to have Jadeveon Clowney. And Saleh said earlier today that, look, we know what Myles Garrett is and what he brings. He called him dirty, and not in a dirty player kind of way, just that he's nasty, that he is very, very good, a premier pass rusher in the league. So, the entire team is going to have to step up if Joe Flacco and this offense will have any chance at beating the Cleveland Browns.
They are 6-point underdogs against the Browns, and the schedule early on in this season really playing into their favor. They beat the Panthers, now the Jets with Joe Flacco. Then it's the Steelers, who don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback anymore, maybe not a playoff team this year, and the Falcons, who are dead last in Pete Prisco's power rankings. How do they feel about the way Jacoby Brissett played and getting off to a good start this season?
Yeah, I think the coaches are ultimately happy enough with Jacoby Brissett. I don't think that anyone is going to sit out here and say that he graded out A+. That he didn't have any mistakes. Of course he did. But when you look at preseason, and maybe there's a take back, maybe Kevin Stefanski would like to sort of go back in time and say, you know what, we know almost beyond a shadow of a doubt that Deshaun Watson is going to be suspended, at least for the first game, at least for the first chunk of time at the beginning of the season. Let's go ahead and get Jacoby Brissett those reps with the number ones. Let's not split those. We'll worry about that later on when Deshaun is able to get out onto the field. But they decided to split those reps in preseason. And so in week one, Jacoby Brissett and his team, his offense, they didn't look like they were fully in sync. He didn't have that connection with Amari Cooper, his number one wide receiver. But, you know, when you have Nick Chubb, you can win a whole lot of games. And so Jacoby Brissett played well enough to get the win. He didn't lose them the game. And as you spelled out earlier, with their schedule coming up, it is an advantageous schedule. And then you consider that the Pittsburgh Steelers, on a short week, 2 weeks from now, they're not going to have TJ Watt. And so you keep looking at this schedule for the Cleveland Browns. You say, okay, 1-0. Now, for the first time in, 17, 18 years, and now you say, okay, 2-0. And you look at that Pittsburgh game, you know it's going to be a dogfight with or without TJ Watt. And so if you're a Browns fan and you're saying, hey, and you're waiting until week 13 for QB1 Deshaun Watson to get out there and rise another level, you're thinking to yourself, hey, we're picking up some wins, some much-needed wins to stay afloat and be competitive once you get into December. So Browns certainly optimistic right now, and certainly optimistic facing a Jets team that, as we just talked about, has a lot of struggles along their offensive line.
Word of caution, though, because we W&L'd this whole schedule after the Deshaun Watson news with Pete Prisco and Brady Quinn. I think Pete had him starting 3-1 and only winning 5 or 6 games the entire season. The schedule gets a lot tougher. Let's move on to the Commanders, who had a comeback victory against the Jags to open up the Carson Wentz era. Still not many believers yet, though, it appears, JJ, because they are underdogs this week in Detroit against the Lions.
A little surprising to me, Chris. And listen, I'm far from Vegas, but I was a bit surprised at that. A Detroit Lions team that, to me, hasn't proved that they can really win close games. I was impressed by what I saw with the Washington Commanders. Did Carson Wentz make some sort of typical Carson Wentz mistakes? Yes, but overall, I thought that he had a pretty good game, and certainly relative to the Carson Wentz standard, I thought that he had a really good game. You look at what their defense was able to do, and how Scott Turner, the offensive coordinator, was able to scheme a lot of his guys open. And I liked what I saw out of the Commanders, especially in a pass rush that is without Chase Young and will be for the next couple of weeks. But meanwhile, you look at the Lions, and when they get down in the second half, they are the kings of the backdoor cover. They are a team that, at the end of the day, if you just look at the box score, you say, wow, close game, huh? Lions really stayed with the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, no, they didn't. They were behind for much of the game, and then in the fourth quarter, they score a whole lot of points. In fact, these Lions under Dan Campbell from the start of the 2021 season, they are 0-12 in games where they trail by at least 9 points in the second half, so that's 2 possessions. And they're really, really bad in the second quarter. One of the worst teams in the NFL last year in the second quarter. They had a minus 47 point differential last season, bottom 3 in the NFL. Meanwhile, this past week against the Eagles, they were outscored 24-7. So that's really where games are won and lost for the Detroit Lions. They're pretty average first, third, fourth quarter, but that second quarter is where they really let the game get away from them. And then in the second quarter, no matter what they do in the final 6 minutes of the fourth quarter, no matter how much they sort of pad the stat book there, it ultimately is never truly a one-score game, even though it may finish that way on paper.
Yeah, they are kings of the cover, not necessarily the win. It has not happened. Only 3 times since the start of last season have the Lions won a game. Let's move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They may be without TJ Watt for about a month, but how are they feeling given what was originally feared with that injury?
I mean, they are saying hallelujah. They're looking up to the heavens. Manna may even come down from the sky there in Pittsburgh, that they were able, TJ Watt, we see right here, he's mouthing it. If you're a lip reader, I tore my pec. That's the end of his season, or so we thought. He got very, very good news. There was hope, almost hope against hope on Sunday night that maybe he was wrong. And then Monday, having talked with one doctor, they were saying, hey, actually there's some optimism here, and then got some more opinions, and now ultimately not going to have surgery, rest and rehab, and then 5 weeks from now, you never want to get into the 6. It's exactly 6. Maybe it's 5. Maybe it's 4.5. Maybe it's 7. But the point being that TJ Watt will be back in the middle part of the season for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that is fantastic news for the Steelers. It's great news for all NFL fans and observers, minus opposing quarterbacks, of course. And so what are the Steelers going to do right now? Well, Alex Highsmith, outside linebacker out of UNC Charlotte a couple of years ago, he has been fantastic out there for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Opposite him is going to be a guy, Malik Reed. They traded for him from Denver at the end of August, and so he's going to step up, as he has done throughout the course of his season, for that starter in TJ Watt. The Steelers know there's not a bunch of TJ Watts falling off trees, but if they can make it work with Malik Reed, they just acquired Ryan Anderson to their practice squad previously with the Washington Commanders a couple of years ago. They're just going to try to make it work on that side. But when you have Cam Hayward in the middle of that defense wreaking havoc like he did last week against the Cincinnati Bengals, when you have Alex Highsmith, a guy who's not really a household name outside of Pittsburgh, doing what he's been able to do sort of quietly for the last year plus, the Steelers feel very, very good about the news that they got yesterday, this week, concerning TJ Watt, and are very, very hopeful moving forward.
Jonathan Jones, our lead NFL insider, with us here on HQ as the Steelers look to get off to a 2-0 start. They have the Patriots this week, and they are slight underdogs this Sunday on CBS and Paramount Plus. That Patriots-Steelers game is at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. We also have a couple of games at 4:25 Eastern.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.